Hello and welcome. In a previous video, I built a diorama of a Minotaur battle scene, and I made the trees and shrubs for that project. In order to keep the length reasonable and keep the focus on the diorama, I decided to turn the trees and shrub build into their own video. Let's get to work. I start with floral wire for this tree, and I'm using 24 gauge wire. To start, I wrap tight around the tree trunk for about a finger's width. Anytime I'm wrapping the wire on the trunk, I try to keep the wires close together and some tension. For the branches, I make loops around my finger, then I wrap the trunk a few times and then make another loop and repeat. And in a few minutes, you'll have a tree. Once the top, I make a loop, tuck it in the previous strands, and then just twist it. Then I spread the loops out and straighten the tree a bit so it looks like a flower pattern from the top. And this makes it easier to spread glue and work with it. The next step is to coat the trunk to give it that bark texture. You could use diorama earth. You could use texture paste, although it's probably not very flexible. In this case, I'm using sawdust from my table saw that I sifted to make it fine. For glue, I'm using Liquitex Matte Medium. Although it costs more than Mod Podge, it dries clear, stays strong and flexible for years. It's just really good product. Spread the glue on the trunk only and coat with sawdust, and then set aside to dry. Once the trunk is dry, you can work on the branches. Brush glue on the wires only, not the trunk, and coat with 12mm static grass. This is where the loops will help catch the static grass. And then set aside to let dry. Once dry, cut the loops and straighten the branches a bit. Trim the tree a bit, straighten a little bit more, start to get that shape that you want. Brush more glue on the branches and sprinkle more static grass. And again, let them dry. Here I put some glue on just the outer parts of the branches and coated with 2mm static grass. And again, let dry. Once dry, it's time for some initial paint. So I hold upside down and paint the trunk and bottom of the branches with a shadow color. This is a brown-black mix and pretty thin with IPA. That paint and IPA mixture dries really fast, so one more light coat of 2mm static grass, and once that is dry, highlight with some greens and yellow greens, and these are finished and ready to put on the diorama. The small trees I used on this diorama were ones that I had made previously, so I'll just summarize them. These are simply the same flower stem wires as the tree trunks, and by spreading glue and 12mm static grass in layers, allowing each layer to dry, I ended up with this long bushy stick. I then cut them to length for each tree that I wanted, trimmed, and then painted with the same brown-black mixture that I used on the trees. And then added a little bit of static grass, 2mm, or a really fine turf. Once that's dry, paint some highlights, and in the case of one tree on the left side of the diorama, I painted with brown so it looked like a dead tree. These are really easy to make, so I made a lot of them. And since I used the Liquitex matte medium, even though these are over a year old, they are in perfect shape, and I just store them in a Ziploc bag. Next up is the shrubs. These are really inexpensive to make and also pretty quick. I start by cutting random lengths off a spool of sisal rope, the rough rope you find in a hardware store. I pinch that section of rope with my fingers and dip the end into matte medium, and then lay on parchment paper to dry overnight. After they are dry, I use some small clamps to hold each one so I can work on them. After a bit of trimming, I apply matte medium and 2mm static grass and let them dry. Once dry, I base color with the same black-brown mix thinned with IPA that I used on the trees. After this initial base color, I spread the branches out, trim a little bit, get them to look the way I want, before applying glue and a leaf texture. I had a couple different leaf textures that I chose to use here, so just picked one by random for each shrub. Once dry, put in place on the diorama. Finally, for the tree trunks, I start with whittling the end of a styrene tube to look like the trees were chopped down with an axe. Then I cut each one and place into a foam board covered with parchment paper. I coat each one with golden fiber paste and then shape the paste to look like roots and let that dry. I'm thinking that next time I make full trees, I want to try this too. It'll be a nice upgrade to the full trees. Once the fiber paste is dry, I base coat with the same black brown, and once in place with the diorama, I highlight the top cut section with wood color. The tree trunks were glued in place to keep the flexible roots flush with the ground, but all the trees and shrubs are just placed in holes, which is really nice because I can rearrange any of the trees or shrubs as well as any of the figures. With that wraps up this video. Thanks for watching. Take care.